Hey everyone, I'm Drew.
And I'm Delco.
Welcome to the D&D show. Well, we're back. We've taken a little time off, had some things to take care of, and obviously we've got a little bit of some new equipment we're playing around with, but just trying to make the show a little better and kind of keep things moving along. So now that we're back, we're going to keep going with it, and hopefully you're getting something out of it. But in the last video, we had Rick Bartrand with us from One Narrow Path, a buddy of mine from up north, and one of the things we were talking about was pride and how pride can really get in the way of allowing us to have compassion on those around us. We're so self-centered, we're so focused on ourselves, we fail to see where a lot of people are coming from a lot of the time. So in this video, we're just going to kind of talk about perspective and how a fresh perspective can really open your eyes and change the way you view people and situations, so we can learn to react more appropriately instead of just responding to situations. So it just gives us a little more peace and patience in how we deal with people, interact with people, and just how we handle situations in general. So anything you want to say?
Yeah. With that being said, that's a good point that you made about perspective, because sometimes we only look at how we feel or how we see things, and sometimes it's hard to try to view how other people view. We had a prime example of that probably a couple weeks ago, where it was really put into play of being compassionate, being long-suffering, being loving to people. Sometimes we it's easier for us to say it than to do it, and I was put in a situation where like I had to put the compassion and the perspective and all that stuff together, and it was really really hard for me to do. Like, it's easy to sit here and say, oh, we got to have compassion towards each other, or we got to have this, to try to have the same view as someone else, but when it really hits home and when you really have to do it, it's much harder to do. So I think it's something that we have to practice and try to implement in our lives and make it a habit, that we may be able to integrate some of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And I know for both of us, can be a pretty challenging couple weeks.
Yeah.
And I think we even said that in our last video. We were sitting around. Once you actually decide, you make up your mind you're going to do it, Satan's going to come at you with all kinds of things to try to keep you from doing it. And you just got to fight through it. You got to keep that in front of you, all the time. But it's good to be back. And I think there's a passage in the Old Testament that kind of relates to perspective, and I think it can apply to all of us. And it's in 2 Kings chapter 6. And there's a lot of stuff going on in that passage, in that section, but there's one part where Elisha and his servant are doing some spying, and there's a lot of stuff going on. The king's trying to find them, armies and chariots and all that stuff. And they wake up one morning, they're kind of running. They wake up one morning, and the servant looks outside and sees all these chariots and horses and everything, and he starts freaking out. And he's like, Master, what are we going to do? Well, Elisha just sends up this little prayer and says, Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. And it says, so the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And I think, how many times do we get so caught up? And I think we even did a show on what we focus on draws us in.
Yeah.
And this is a perfect example of that too, where we get so caught up in a situation, we tend to freak out. Or we deal with somebody and we tend to get pissed off. Or whatever, because there's so much going on, and it's at times it's more of a spiritual situation or a spiritual condition than it is an actual situation, and we fail to see that from the spiritual perspective. Whereas if we were just to stop, take a deep breath, and if we prayed that every day, just Lord, open my eyes that I may see, and just imagine how much that would change your view and your perspective on life in general. how it would make it that much easier at times, to just kind of at least be able to see where somebody's coming from, or just try to understand how this situation came about, and it just helps you deal with it a little easier that way. I remember when I first heard this little passage, I was sitting around with a group of guys at a men's retreat, and we were talking about that, and ever since then, this was 6-7 years ago, and ever since then, that's just one little passage that I always tend to go to, and it's just made a big difference. It's something simple, and it's just quick, and it's just opened my eyes to everything that I may see from a fresh perspective.
And I think that sometimes we get to the point where we are only, especially like when we're saying, Lord, open my eyes, sometimes we get so far ahead of God that we can't hear him. So when he is trying to tell us to be quiet and just listen, we overreact and it's already too late, and we blow up the situation. Where in this situation, Elijah's saying, Lord, open his eyes so he can see, because he had already seen like all the army around him. Obviously his faith was, like none really, because all he could see was what was in front of him. And Elijah asked the Lord, he said, Lord, open his eyes. So God had to open his eyes so he could see that God was protecting him, And I think that the Lord can do the same for us, just like you were saying, if we only would pray this prayer and we would diligently do it. I think that he could do the same for all of us. I know that he can do the same for all of us. So I think that, that is important, that we have to implement it in our lives, and we have to believe that the Lord can do it, and he will.
Yeah, definitely. And there's another passage that I'll have to see if I can find it, but there's another one where it's a similar situation, but they're attacking at night, and I think it was the Lord that told them to surround the camp. There's only like 300 men or something like that, and they said to light all your torches and all that stuff. So at nighttime, when they surrounded the camp with the very little men that they had, the whole camp started freaking out because they thought they were surrounded. But I'd have to go back and look at that and see if I can find it. But just taking time, slowing down, like you said, not reacting, and just asking God for help, and he'll give it to you. He's always there. So many times we think we got to go through stuff alone, and we really don't.
Yeah.
So, and for now, I think we'll call it a wrap, unless there's anything else you want to say.
I think that I'm good, and just keep an open mind and put God first.
There you go. And with that, we'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.
Have a good one.